Hello everyone, welcome to and welcome back to my channel Book Time with Elvis with me, Mark, and today I thought I'd make a video for you on my top 22 of 22. So it's the 22 best books I read last year in the year 2022. I thought I would keep it to top 10, but of course that's very difficult. The first 17 or so books in this list are 5-star reads. The others scored lower, but for different reasons, and I felt that the books themselves were actually good. It's just that I'm a bit picky sometimes, and there are a few things that meant that I marked them down, but usually that was for something like, I don't know, animal cruelty or something, rather than how well written it was or how good the story was. So I'm a bit weird like that, but I'm happy to acknowledge them in this list as books that I think are worth reading for you, and perhaps you might want to give them a go. Generally, in the first 17, well, actually, there are probably more because there are a couple by the same author that I've just bundled together in this list, but they're in no particular order, at least the 5-star reads. They're all wonderful. So yeah, let's have a look at them. The first one I'll mention is the last book that I read for 2022, and that was Our Mutual Friend by Charles Dickens. It was the first time reading it for me. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't want to go too much into spoilers for any of these books, but I will, of course, talk a little bit about them. There's a lot of things happening in Our Mutual Friend, a lot of stories within stories, and there's a murder, and people trying to work out who committed the murder. Gosh, my goodness, I can't speak. But that's, if you like, the main thread. But there's also kind of romances. There's fights. There's class struggle, of course. All the things that you would expect from Charles Dickens. And it was good fun and a good read, and thoroughly enjoyed it. It's quite a big book, over 800 pages, I think, but it didn't feel like it. And next up we have Dracula by Bram Stoker. It was the first time reading it for me. I do want to point out that the reason these books are new to me in 2022, by the way, so I've never read any of these books until I read them last year. So Dracula is one of them, and it was fantastic. I read it aloud on this channel with Micah Cummins and Steve Donahue, and I found it extremely enjoyable. It was nothing like I thought it would be. I think the problem I have sometimes with stories or characters that are maybe larger than the original work, it's become so much part of our culture that I feel that if I actually read it, then it will probably prove to be a disappointment, and that definitely wasn't the case. In fact, Dracula exceeded my expectations. Another new one for me was Ghost Stories of an Antiquary by Montague Rhodes James, or M.R. James, and it's a collection of short ghost stories written by the late Victorian, early 20th century academic, and they were fantastic. I mean, they're all centered around academia. I suppose it's probably kind of one of the original dark academia type books, and they're just wonderfully told stories, full of atmosphere. A couple were genuinely spine-tingling, and I would really recommend them to you. Actually, I believe Michael K. Vaughan is going to be having this book in Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, Cheap Old Book Club, I think. Sorry, can't remember the name. At some point this year, so if you get the chance, jump in on that. I would say it's very good. Another older work, also to be found in the public domain. In fact, yeah, all these so far are to be found in the public domain, so that's good. You don't have to pay for them. Next up, as I said, we have Parnassus on Wheels by Christopher Morley. This was an absolutely charming book, a very short book. I fell in love with it. I think I made a video even saying I'd fallen in love because it'd been a long time since I picked up a book, and just immediately felt emotionally connected to this book. Probably that sounds rather melodramatic, but it was wonderful. It's the story of a brother and sister who live together in the countryside, and the sister's kind of devoted to her brother. She does everything for him. He's a writer, and he takes liberties, basically, the way he uses her, and she gets the opportunity to buy a mobile bookshop, which she does, and then she travels around the country, or part of the country, having adventures with this bookshop and the person who was the previous owner. And it's a wonderful read. For any bookish person, you have to read Parnassus on Wheels by Christopher Morley. Next up, we have The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. Again, so well known, I probably don't have to say too much about it. I read it as part of Dictember back in September there. Great mystery, of course. You probably know the film of it. The book is wonderful, good, solid read. Next, we have actually the first 3 of the Charlie Chan books. I read 3 of them, mostly in the first half of last year, and I still need to read the other 3. Again, I've said a couple of times on this channel how Charlie Chan is probably maligned for the wrong reasons. I think people are assuming that it's going to be very racist, or that Charlie Chan in some ways is being ridiculed, especially as Elder Biggers, of course, himself is not Chinese, so I guess people have problems in this day and age with that. However, I would advise you to suspend your own prejudices about what you think Charlie Chan might be like, and actually pick one up and read it, because they're excellent fun, really well done. And while there is racism in there, the racism is not from the author. It's to highlight the stupidity of people that come into contact with Charlie. So Charlie himself is very much the hero of those stories, and he is portrayed, I think, in a very respectful and very kind way that makes him a character that deserves to come back. I mean, I'm not talking about the cartoons of him or whatever that may be seen to be racist and that kind of stuff, but this is definitely not what you might expect it to be. So suspend your prejudices and give Charlie Chan, the Charlie Chan books by Elder Biggers, a go. You will not be disappointed, I'm sure of it. Next up was Pride and Prejudice, a first for me, my second Jane Austen. The first I read was Northanger Abbey back in 2021. I read Pride and Prejudice aloud on this channel over the course of the whole of Jane Austen July, and it was wonderful. I put off reading it for so long because perhaps I didn't suspend my own prejudices, and I thought, oh, it's going to be just some form of, early 19th century Regency chick lit, and I have no interest in it. And how wrong I was. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and will definitely reread it at some point. Again, it's such a famous book. I feel, in a video like this, it doesn't really make sense to really talk too much about it. Another female author that I've come to, I had read a collection of short stories of her years ago, but I've really come to her through being on BookTube, and that's Daphne du Maurier. And last year I read Don't Look Now and Other Stories, which was fantastic, but the one I really enjoyed was Jamaica Inn. I found it fantastic. I'd read Rebecca back in 2021, and it was great. However, I prefer Jamaica Inn. I think it's more atmospheric. It was the story was more exciting. I believed it dragged me in more so than Rebecca, although I do concede that Rebecca is excellent. In August of last year, Sean D. Stanfast and myself hosted August of Adventure, and during that we read all sorts of adventure works, and one of those was a first time for me, which was Tarzan of the Apes by Edgar Rice Burroughs. You probably know Michael K. Vaughan often discusses the works of Edgar Rice Burroughs on his channel, and I thought it was time to give him a go, and I wasn't disappointed. Again, Tarzan is one of those things that's very much part of our culture, be it British or American or anybody's probably. We all have images of this man raised by apes swinging through the trees, and it wasn't again, what I expected. I found it great fun. Okay, there are perhaps some um, problematic pieces in that, but again, it's not. Um, it's just unfortunately something sometimes we have to accept with these books, and we take that and learn from it, and put it in the context of the time, and we know it's wrong today. So I think you can kind of suspend that a little bit when you read these books, as long as you are clear, of course, as to the problems surrounding some of the words and phrases that Rice Burroughs uses in his work. Next up, we have A Kiss Before Dying by Ira Levine. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Good fun. I went on a bit of an Ira Levine kick and read, I think, almost all of his books last year, but I think A Kiss Before Dying was my favorite of them. It's a murder mystery, although it's not really so much of a mystery because you know who the murderer is straight off, but it's fun watching the other characters work that out, and then of course to see whether or not the murderer gets his or her comeuppance in the end. It's excellent. And then the next two I'm going to talk about, I've put them both in at number 11 there, but as I said, the list itself isn't in any particular order. The next four books really are part of the June on the Range event that was held last June, and this was a real revelation to me because I'm not somebody who's read any westerns before, I think, and it's nice that I can put four westerns on the list that I thought were excellent. Two of them by Glendon Swatholt, The Shootist and Old Colts. The Shootist is about an old gunslinger who's got terminal cancer, and he is trying to kind of just spend what little time he has left in this small town, and then he decides, he's going to go out with a bang, and whether he does or not, you should read it to find out. The other one by Glennon Swatholt is Old Colts, and I thought this was excellent. It was a fictional story of two well-known gunfighters, Wyatt Earp and I've forgotten his name. Is it Bill Masterson maybe, or somebody? He's quite well known, but it's I read this back in June and I'm getting on, so I can't remember exactly. And they meet up after a long time in New York City, and by this point, time has caught up on them. The old ways are not around anymore. They're very much stuck in the past. They decide to take a trip back to Dodge City, I think, or is it Tombstone? One of the two, anyway. And they kind of get involved, like the tourist part of it, and they start an affair with like two local girls, and it's just a great book. It's really good fun, very, very well done, very funny in parts, and also quite moving. So I would recommend that. Next up is Valdez is Coming by Elmore Leonard. This is, I think, again, quite well known. I probably don't have to talk about it too much, but it was a great read, great fun, following this character Valdez, who he's I can't remember if he's mixed race or Mexican or indigenous Mexican American, but he this woman has a husband killed, and she's mistreated by the people who did it. So he's determined that these people have to pay some kind of financial compensation for it, and of course they refuse to do so. So he heads out to make sure that they do pay for what they did, and that's excellent read. And the last of the westerns is Charles Portis's True Grit, which is phenomenal and definitely worth your time. If you haven't read it and you want something good to read for June on the Range this year, pick it up. I mean, you've probably seen the films, either the John Wayne one or the Jeff Bridges one, but it's a great story following a young girl whose father has been murdered, and she has to go to town and deal with the bringing his body back, and she decides that she wants those responsible for his murder to be kind of brought to justice. Nobody seems really interested, so she manages to hire this US Marshal, Rooster Cogburn, to help track down the responsible parties, and all sorts of adventures and misadventures ensue, and it's brilliantly done. Number 14 is an anti-war book about the, I guess, futility of war, and it's a short book. It's called The Hunters by James Salter, and it follows some fighter pilots in the Korean War and their struggle or wish to become an ace fighter. So it means shooting down, I think, at least 5 enemy aircraft. And again, it's a very, even though it's short, it's a very psychological and in-depth book about the, as I said, the futility of war and also the psychological damage it has on the people involved. But I thought it was great and well worth your time. Next up, we had The African Queen by C.S. Forester. Yes, C.S. Forester of Hornblower fame wrote the book The African Queen, which was subsequently made into a film with Katharine Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart. And it's good fun. You know, I enjoyed it. It was great adventure. It's not very long. And, you know, if you want a quick read and you don't know what to pick up The African Queen. Sticking with Africa, I suppose, but this time further north. I thoroughly enjoyed the first book in a series, which is called Beau Geste by Percival Christopher Wren, or P.C. Wren, and it follows 3 brothers who find themselves independently enlisted in the French Foreign Legion owing to some scandal of stolen jewellery back in England. And this is just great fun, a great adventure yarn, and highly recommended. Continuing through, we haven't got that many more left, don't worry. Continuing through, we have Ian McGuire's The North Water, which scored a little lower for me just because of the extreme violence that I found distasteful, especially, of course, towards animals. But as I say, most of my scoring on Goodreads is done for me, not for other people, because I need to know if it's a book that I'm going to go back to or not. So, you know, it looks like I'm over generous at times, but that's because it's a book I liked a lot and I will probably read again. I don't think too much about, you know, the in-depth critiquing it in depth over how, you know, well written it is and things like that. I think that, did I like that book? Yes. Would I definitely reread it again? Yes. Okay, 5 stars. Did I like that book? Am I likely to read it again? Yeah, okay, 4 stars. Did I like that book? Will I read it again? Maybe not. 3 stars, that kind of thing. So this is one of those, and that's The North Water by Ian McGuire, which is a murder mystery, kind of, that takes place on a ship in the early 19th century on a whaler, and there's all sorts of killing of Arctic animals, which is, of course, very sad and distressing, but the murder as well is extremely disturbing and depressing as well. But it is a good murder story. It's a good murder book. So if you can get past those things, the book itself is worth reading. And then we have Measuring the World by Daniel Kellman. This is a book I read that was translated from the German. It was a big bestseller, following adventures, really, of 2 real men, Alexander von Humboldt, the naturalist, and I've forgotten his name. Oh my goodness. That's right. Alexander von Humboldt and Carl Friedrich Gauss, the mathematician. And it kind of infuses reality with fiction, and it's, I guess, a historical fiction novel. Not overly long, very interesting about how the 2 men's lives intersect, and it kind of follows these parallel lives. You know, with the chapter here on Humboldt, and then at the same time, what is Gauss doing in the next chapter, that kind of thing. So Great fun. Very well done. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Next, we have The Doomsday Book by Connie Willis. An unusual foray into the world of science fiction for me, but this was a really great book. I just have a problem with the ending of it, and again, it's to do with animals, and if you read it, you'll know what I mean. But it's not, it's not that terrible. It's just something that frustrated me, so I marked it down for that, but I think for a lot of people, it would be a 5-star read. It follows a young academic who wants to learn more about life in the 14th century, so she travels back in time because it's a sci-fi novel, and in Oxford of the future this is possible. However, she's been accidentally sent back to the wrong part of the 14th century. She's sent back to the Black Death, and she's sent back while she's ill, and then at the same time in Oxford people are falling down ill because of this pandemic. Believe it or not, the novel's written in the early 1990s, but there are a lot of things parallel to our own world today. There's like a movement that wants Britain out of the European Union and this stuff. So yeah, and the problem is that all the people who can help her are either ill. There's a quarantine around Oxford, so it's all about this her trying to survive in 14th century plague-ridden England, and then the people trying to survive in 20th century plague-ridden Oxford, battling to try and bring her home or rescue her. Next, we have The Odessa File by Frederick Forsyth. Yes, it's a wide range of books here. I thoroughly enjoyed it. This was very well done. Frederick Forsyth, of course, writing about a network that had been set up to rescue and protect the identities of former Nazis and things like that. And this was just a good, yarn to while away a few hours on a rainy afternoon. And the last two now, one was The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. I read this in a buddy read with a dear subscriber, Sonia Deveni. And my first time reading Bulgakov, I really enjoyed it. It's definitely very weird. One has to wonder what Bulgakov was on when he wrote it, with kind of like these talking cats and weird flying sequences and all this kind of stuff. But at the heart of it all, I thought it was a really good book and actually very enjoyable, and one I'll definitely be revisiting. So, and the last one I know is one that divides a lot of people here on BookTube, but one I actually liked, and that was Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I thought it was good. Again, it was nothing like I expected. It was dark, it was bleak. I did find some comic relief in it. I know people might disagree with me, but I found the maid to be fairly amusing at times. And I just found it an interesting read. Yes, I can see why people don't like it, but I enjoyed it. So there you go. That's my top 22 for 2022. I know I raced through them, but otherwise this would have been a very long video, and I also thought probably you wouldn't want me to release it in different parts. Just give you some suggestions, so that's what I've done. Thank you so much, everybody. Do have a great day, and I'll be back again soon. Bye for now.